Two of country music's brightest stars, both nursing broken hearts, both navigating the wreckage of very public breakups, and both finding an unexpected connection that has the entire music world buzzing with speculation. What started as a professional friendship forged on tour buses and backstage green rooms has suddenly transformed into something that has fans, tabloids, and industry insiders all asking the same question. What exactly is going on between Keith Urban and Kelsea Ballerini? The answer is far more complex, far more touching, and far more surprising than anyone could have predicted. This is the story of two artists who found each other at exactly the right moment, or perhaps at exactly the wrong time, depending on who you ask. Let's rewind to September 2025, a month that will forever be marked in country music history as one of the most shocking periods in recent memory. The news broke like a thunderclap across the entertainment world. Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman, the golden couple of country music in Hollywood, the pair that everyone pointed to as proof that true love could survive the pressures of fame, were separating after 19 years of marriage. 19 years. Nearly 2 decades of what seemed like an unshakable bond, suddenly fractured. The divorce filing came on September 30th, and the reasons cited were those familiar, painful words that never quite captured the full story. Irreconcilable differences, marital difficulties. But anyone who has followed Keith's career knows that behind those legal terms lies a human story of heartbreak, of two people who tried to make it work, but ultimately couldn't bridge the gap that had grown between them. Keith Urban, the 57-year-old guitar virtuoso from New Zealand who became one of Nashville's most beloved adopted sons, was suddenly single for the first time in nearly 2 decades. The man who had written love songs inspired by his marriage, who had thanked Nicole in countless award speeches, who had been open about his struggles with addiction and how she had stood by him through rehabilitation, was now moving into his own residence in Nashville, packing up pieces of a life he'd built with someone he thought would be his forever. Sources close to the situation revealed that Keith's decision to move out was a turning point, the moment when what had been a private struggle became an unavoidable reality. He acquired his own place in Nashville, separate from their family home, and the physical distance became a metaphor for the emotional chasm that had developed between them. But here's where our story takes an unexpected turn, because at almost the exact same moment Keith's marriage was falling apart, another country star was going through her own devastating heartbreak. Kelsea Ballerini, the 32-year-old powerhouse vocalist who had captured hearts with her authentic lyrics and magnetic stage presence, was also newly single. Her relationship with Chase Stokes, the Outer Banks actor who had seemed like her perfect match, had ended after nearly 3 years together. The announcement came on September 14th, just 2 days after Chase had posted a heartfelt birthday tribute to Kelsea on social media, making the timing all the more shocking and painful. 2 days between a public declaration of affection and the announcement of a breakup. Imagine the whiplash, the confusion, the raw emotion of that rapid transition. Kelsea, who had already weathered one public divorce from fellow country artist Morgan Evans in 2022, found herself once again navigating the treacherous waters of heartbreak in the spotlight. In a TikTok video that would garner millions of views, she asked the public for something simple yet profound. Let us be. 3 words that carried the weight of exhaustion, of someone who had given pieces of her heart to her music and her fans, but needed to protect what remained. She was asking for space, for privacy, for the ability to heal without constant speculation and scrutiny. But the universe, it seems, had different plans. Because when two wounded souls exist in the same orbit, when they share the same industry, the same city, the same circle of friends and collaborators, something inevitable happens. They find each other, and Keith Urban and Kelsea Ballerini were about to discover just how powerful that gravitational pull could be. According to multiple sources close to both artists, Keith and Kelsea have grown remarkably close in the weeks and months following their respective breakups. But to understand how significant this connection is, we need to travel back in time, back to where their friendship first began, because this isn't a story of two strangers suddenly finding comfort in each other. This is a story that has been years in the making. It was 2018, and Kelsea Ballerini was living out a dream she had harbored since middle school. She had been selected as the opening act for Keith Urban's massive Graffiti U World Tour, a career-making opportunity that would put her in front of thousands of fans across the country, night after night, sharing stages in arenas and amphitheaters from coast to coast. But for Kelsea, this wasn't just another tour booking, another line on her resume. This was personal. This was a full-circle moment that connected directly to her origin story as an artist. Let's go back even further. Picture a young Kelsea Ballerini in middle school, probably around 12 or 13 years old, in that formative period when the music you discover becomes a soundtrack to your identity formation. She's scrolling through MySpace. Remember MySpace, that social media platform that seems like ancient history now, but was the center of teenage social life in the mid-2000s. Her friend Courtney had a particular song as her MySpace page song, a feature that immediately told visitors something about who you were and what mattered to you. That song was Stupid Boy by Keith Urban. Now, Stupid Boy wasn't just any country song. Released in 2006, it was a scathing takedown on a man who failed to see the value of an incredible woman, a man who couldn't hold her, 'cause he couldn't even hold himself. The song, written from a woman's perspective despite being performed by a man, showcased Keith's ability to inhabit different emotional territories, to tell stories that resonated beyond his own experience. And for young Kelsea, who was already writing songs herself, already infatuated with the craft of songwriting, that song became a revelation. She discovered Keith Urban's music through that MySpace page, and it changed the trajectory of her life. Fast forward to 2018, and Kelsea wasn't just opening for her childhood hero. She was getting to know him as a person, as a mentor, as a friend. Every night of that Graffiti U tour, she would watch from the side of the stage as Keith commanded audiences with his guitar wizardry and genuine connection with fans. She absorbed lessons about performance, about authenticity, about how to maintain humility and gratitude even at the highest levels of success. And Keith, for his part, recognized something special in Kelsea. He saw her talent, her work ethic, her genuine love for the music and the fans. He offered advice, not just about career decisions, but about relationships, about balancing personal life with professional ambition, about staying true to yourself in an industry that constantly tries to reshape you into something more marketable. In interviews from that period, Kelsea spoke glowingly about Keith's guidance. She told Elite Daily that she looked up to Keith when it came to both career and relationship advice. She admired how he seemed to balance a thriving music career with a strong marriage and family life. The irony of that statement, knowing what we know now, is almost painful. But at the time, Keith and Nicole seemed rock solid, the kind of couple that gave hope to everyone in the entertainment industry, that lasting love was possible despite the challenges of fame. The friendship that formed during that 2018 tour didn't end when the tour buses pulled into their final destinations. Keith and Kelsea stayed in touch, crossed paths at industry events, collaborated on various projects. They performed together at the CMA Fest in June 2025, both bringing their A game to Nashville's biggest country music celebration. They maintain what sources describe as a supportive friendship, the kind of relationship where you genuinely care about someone's well-being and success, where you check in not because you have to, but because you want to. And then came February 2025, a moment that perfectly encapsulates the depth of their connection and the impact Keith has had on Kelsea's life and career. Kelsea was performing at Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, a homecoming show that was nearly 7 years in the making. This was a massive career milestone, playing a sold-out show in Music City, in the arena where the biggest names in country music perform. The energy in the venue was electric. The crowd was completely dialed in, and Kelsea was delivering a performance that showcased just how far she'd come as an artist. And then, in a moment that would send social media into overdrive, Kelsea brought out a special guest. Keith Urban walked onto that stage, guitar in hand, and the crowd erupted. But what they performed together wasn't some chart-topping duet or a medley of hits. They performed Stupid Boy, the very song that had introduced Kelsea to Keith's music all those years ago on her friend's MySpace page. The full-circle nature of that moment was overwhelming. Kelsea became visibly emotional during the performance, and you could see on her face the weight of that journey. From a middle school girl discovering a song on social media to standing on one of country music's biggest stages performing that same song with the man who originally recorded it. In an Instagram post following the concert, Kelsea wrote about the full circle with my friend Keith Urban, and that word, friend, carried so much meaning. Because in an industry where relationships are often transactional, where people connect because of what they can do for each other's careers, genuine friendship is rare and precious. Keith wasn't just a mentor or a collaborator to Kelsea. He was someone who had been there at crucial moments, someone who had offered wisdom and support, someone who genuinely cared about her as a person, not just as a rising star in country music. So now we arrive at October 2025, just weeks after both Keith and Kelsea have experienced devastating breakups, and suddenly their longtime friendship is being viewed through a completely different lens. Multiple tabloids and entertainment news outlets are reporting that Keith has grown close to Kelsea, that she's been offering him a shoulder to cry on, that they're leaning on each other for emotional support during this difficult period. And immediately, the speculation machine goes into overdrive. Are they dating? Is this a rebound situation? Is their friendship evolving into something romantic? Are we witnessing the beginning of country music's next power couple? Let's take a moment to examine what we actually know versus what's being speculated. According to sources close to both artists, sources that have been quoted in publications ranging from Radar Online to Daily Mail to Sky News Australia, Keith and Kelsea have indeed been spending time together and supporting each other through their respective breakups. These same sources emphasize, as collaborators and colleagues in the country music scene, Keith and Kelsea have crossed paths frequently over the years and maintained a supportive friendship. Crucially, many of these reports explicitly state that there's no suggestion their relationship has been anything other than professional and friendly. But here's where things get complicated. Because human relationships are always complicated, especially when they're happening in the public eye, especially when they involve two attractive, talented people who are both emotionally vulnerable. One source told reporters that Keith is still very close to Kelsea Ballerini, who's also newly single, and that phrasing, still very close, suggests a continuation of their existing friendship rather than something brand new. Another insider noted that Keith has plenty of support around him, mentioning not just Kelsea but also his guitarist Maggie Baugh, who has also been rumored to have a romantic connection with Keith. The Maggie Baugh situation adds another layer to this already complex narrative. Maggie is a 25-year-old musician who plays guitar in Keith's band, and rumors have been swirling about a potential romance between them as well. Some reports suggest Keith might be dating two women simultaneously, though there's no concrete evidence to support this claim. What seems more likely, based on the available information, is that Keith is surrounded by supportive female friends and collaborators during a vulnerable time, and the media is doing what the media does best, taking genuine friendship and support and spinning it into romantic speculation. Let's talk about the psychology of what's happening here, because it's actually quite profound when you go through a significant breakup, especially one that ends a long-term relationship, especially one that plays out in the public eye. You need support systems. You need people who understand the unique pressures of your life, who can relate to the experience of having your personal pain become public consumption, who can offer perspective and empathy without judgment. For Keith, Urban and Kelsea Ballerini, they are part of a relatively small community of people who can truly understand what they're going through. Think about it. Keith's marriage to Nicole wasn't just a personal relationship. It was a brand, a narrative that the public had invested in. Every time they walked a red carpet together, every time Keith thanked Nicole in an acceptance speech, every time Nicole talked about Keith in interviews, they were feeding a story that millions of people believed in. The story of the country music star who found love with a Hollywood actress, who overcame addiction challenges, who built a family, who proved that opposites could not just attract but sustain a lasting connection. The collapse of that narrative isn't just personally devastating for Keith. It's also a very public failure, a disappointment of fans who saw their relationship as aspirational. Similarly, Kelsea has experienced the pain of public heartbreak twice now, first with her divorce from Morgan Evans, and now with her split from Chase Stokes. She knows what it's like to have relationship milestones celebrated by strangers, to have your love life dissected and analyzed, to have your pain become content for gossip columns and social media discussions. She understands a strange disconnect between the private reality of a breakup, all the complicated emotions and practical considerations and grief, and the public performance of handling it with grace and maturity while everyone watches and judges. So when Keith and Kelsea spend time together now, when they talk about their experiences and offer each other support, They're connecting on a level that most people simply cannot access. They share a unique understanding of what the other is going through. They can be vulnerable with each other without fear that their words will be twisted or leaked or used against them, because they both value discretion and both understand the stakes of public vulnerability. They can offer each other advice and comfort from a place of genuine empathy rather than theoretical sympathy. But let's also acknowledge the elephant in the room. They're both attractive, talented, successful people who are newly single and spending time together. Of course, there's going to be speculation about romantic potential. Of course, people are going to look for signs that their relationship is evolving beyond friendship. Human beings are natural pattern seekers and storytellers, and the narrative of two wounded hearts finding comfort in each other and potentially falling in love is irresistible. It's the plot of countless songs, movies, and novels. It's romantic, it's redemptive, it's hopeful, and maybe, just maybe, there's something to it. Maybe over time, as Keith and Kelsea continue to support each other and spend time together, their friendship will evolve into something more. Maybe they'll discover that the person who understands them best, who can meet them where they are emotionally and professionally, who shares their values and passions, is someone who's been in their life all along. That would be a beautiful story, and it wouldn't be unprecedented. Many successful relationships begin as friendships that deepen during periods of vulnerability and change. But it's equally possible, perhaps even more likely, that what we're witnessing is simply a beautiful example of genuine friendship, of two people who care about each other supporting each other through difficult times without any romantic agenda. In a culture that often struggles to accept that men and women can be close friends without sexual tension or romantic potential, Keith and Kelsea's relationship might actually be modeling something really important. The value of cross-gender friendships that exist purely for mutual support and understanding. Let's consider the timing here as well, because timing matters enormously in these situations. Keith filed divorce paperwork on August 29th, and Nicole filed officially on September 30th. Kelsea's breakup was announced on September 14th. We're talking about events that happened just weeks ago as of this recording. These are fresh wounds. These are people who are still processing loss, still adjusting to new realities, still figuring out who they are outside of the relationships that have defined them for years. The idea that either of them would jump immediately into a new romantic relationship seems psychologically unlikely and probably unhealthy. There's a concept in psychology called the rebound relationship, where people who just ended a significant relationship quickly enter into a new one, often as a way to avoid processing the pain of the breakup or to reassure themselves that they're still desirable and capable of being loved. Rebound relationships can sometimes evolve into lasting partnerships, but more often they're temporary, intense connections that serve a specific emotional purpose before inevitably ending. Both Keith and Kelsea are mature, self-aware adults who have access to therapy and support systems. They're likely aware of the rebound trap and the importance of taking time to heal and reflect before pursuing new romantic connections. Moreover, both of them have children to consider. Keith and Nicole share two daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, who are now teenagers. Keith has been very protective of his daughters throughout his career, trying to shield them from excessive public attention, while also acknowledging the reality that they're growing up with famous parents. The dissolution of Keith and Nicole's marriage is undoubtedly affecting these girls profoundly, and Keith's priority right now has to be providing them with stability and reassurance during this transition. Jumping into a high-profile romantic relationship right now would add another layer of complexity and potential stress to an already challenging situation for his family. Kelsea, while she doesn't have children of her own, has been vocal about the importance of self-care and mental health, particularly after her divorce from Morgan Evans. She's written songs about healing, about learning to be okay alone, about reclaiming your identity after a relationship ends. In her TikTok video asking people to let us be after the Chase Stokes breakup, she demonstrated an awareness that she needs space to process and heal. Would she really, just weeks later, be ready to embark on a new romantic relationship? It seems unlikely. What seems far more probable is that Keith and Kelsea are doing exactly what sources close to them say they're doing, supporting each other as friends during a difficult time, leaning on someone who uniquely understands their situation, and finding comfort in a connection that has existed for years and has now become even more valuable during a period of vulnerability. That's not less meaningful than a romantic relationship. In many ways, it's more meaningful because it's rooted in genuine care and mutual respect rather than the intoxicating but potentially misleading chemistry of early-stage romance. Let's also talk about the broader context of country music culture and how it shapes these narratives. Country music has always trafficked in stories of heartbreak and redemption, of love found and lost, and sometimes found again. The genre's fans are deeply invested in the personal lives of its stars, seeing their real-life experiences as inseparable from the songs they write and perform. When a country artist goes through a breakup or divorce, it becomes not just gossip but source material, something that will inevitably influence their next album, their next tour, their next chapter as an artist. Both Keith and Kelsea are songwriter-performers who draw heavily from personal experience in their music. Keith's most acclaimed songs have often been deeply autobiographical, dealing with his struggles with addiction, his love for his family, his experiences growing up in Australia and New Zealand, and later finding success in America. Kelsea has similarly built her career on authentic, vulnerable songwriting that connects directly to her life experiences. Her album Subject to Change, released in 2022, dealt extensively with her divorce from Morgan Evans and the process of healing and rediscovering herself. Fans of both artists will naturally be waiting to see how their current heartbreaks and whatever comes next will be reflected in their music. This creates an interesting dynamic where their personal lives aren't just personal but are also, in a sense, professional material. Every experience, every emotion, every connection has the potential to become a song, and fans know this and anticipate it. So when people speculate about Keith and Kelsea's relationship, they're not just gossiping about two celebrities. They're trying to predict the narrative arc of their favorite artists' lives and how that will translate into the music they'll create. It's invasive, yes, but it's also part of the implicit contract between country artists and their fans, a contract that says, I'll share my authentic self with you through my music, and in return, you'll be invested in my journey. Let's examine some specific moments that have fueled speculation about Keith and Kelsea's relationship, beyond the general reports of them growing close. There have been a few public interactions that fans have analyzed for hidden meaning. At the CMA Fest in June 2025, both performed on the same night, and while there's no indication they performed together or had extensive interaction beyond typical backstage encounters, the fact that they were both there, both delivering powerful performances, has been noted by fans as another connection point in their timeline. The February 2025 performance of Stupid Boy at Bridgestone Arena has taken on new meaning in retrospect. At the time, it was seen as a beautiful, full-circle moment celebrating Kelsea's journey and her friendship with Keith. Now, some fans are re-watching that performance looking for signs of deeper connection, analyzing body language, interpreting emotional responses. This is the nature of parasocial relationships in the social media age, where every interaction is documented, analyzed, and interpreted through whatever lens fits the narrative people want to believe. There's also the fact that both Keith and Kelsea are currently in Nashville, the heart of country music and home to a relatively tight-knit community of artists, songwriters, and industry professionals. Unlike some celebrities who can reinvent themselves in different cities and escape their past connections, country music stars in Nashville are constantly running into each other at studios, at songwriting sessions, at industry events, at restaurants and bars on Music Row. Keith and Kelsea don't have to make special efforts to see each other. They're simply operating in the same ecosystem, and their paths would naturally cross regularly regardless of the strength of their personal connection. Now, let's talk about the media's role in all of this, because it's significant and somewhat problematic. The moment news broke about Keith and Nicole's separation, tabloids and entertainment news outlets went into overdrive trying to answer the question, who is Keith Urban dating now? There's an assumption built into celebrity coverage that a newly single person, particularly a newly single man, will immediately be seeking or entering into a new relationship. The focus isn't on the grief, the reflection, the personal growth that often needs to happen after a long-term relationship ends. The focus is on the next relationship, the next chapter, the next story. Multiple women have been linked to Keith in the weeks since his separation became public. Maggie Ball, his 25-year-old guitarist, has been the subject of particularly intense speculation, with some outlets suggesting they're working closely together and possibly dating. There have been vague mentions of him being linked to two women simultaneously, though these claims are rarely substantiated with concrete evidence. And of course, Kelsey's name keeps coming up, presented as everything from a supportive friend to a potential romantic partner to a rebound situation. What's often missing from this coverage is nuance, context, and respect for the fact that these are real people going through genuinely difficult experiences. Keith Urban isn't a character in a television show whose storyline needs to keep moving forward to maintain audience interest. He's a 57-year-old man whose 19-year marriage just ended, who is trying to co-parent his teenage daughters through this transition, who is managing professional obligations of being a major touring artist while dealing with personal devastation. The idea that his primary concern right now would be jumping into a new romantic relationship, or that his interactions with female friends and colleagues should be automatically interpreted through a romantic lens, is reductive and arguably disrespectful. Similarly, Kelsea Ballerini isn't sitting around waiting to be rescued by a new romance, or to play the role of comfort to a heartbroken superstar. She's an accomplished artist in her own right, currently serving as a coach on The Voice, continuing to write and record music, managing her own healing process after yet another public breakup. She's 32 years old, in the prime of her career, with her own goals and priorities that extend far beyond her relationship status. The framing of her as Keith Urban's potential new love interest, while understandable given their friendship and circumstances, somewhat diminishes her own identity and agency. Let's shift gears and talk about what we might actually expect to see from both Keith and Kelsea in the coming months, based on their patterns and how they've handled previous challenges. Keith has a history of processing difficult experiences through his music. After his struggles with addiction and his journey through rehabilitation, he was remarkably open in interviews about what he'd been through and how it had changed him. He credited Nicole with supporting him through that period, and that gratitude and love infused many of his songs. It's likely that his next album, whenever it comes, will deal in some way with the end of his marriage, with loss, with change, with whatever he discovers about himself during this period. Keith is also currently in the middle of a concert tour, which presents its own challenges. He recently had to cancel a show in South Carolina due to illness, and one can only imagine the difficulty of getting on stage night after night and performing love songs, many of which were written about or inspired by a relationship that no longer exists. That requires a particular kind of professional discipline and emotional compartmentalization. But it also provides structure, purpose, and connection with fans during a time when those things might be desperately needed. The road can be lonely, but it can also be healing, providing distraction and meaning when personal life feels overwhelming. Kelsea has demonstrated remarkable resilience and growth following her divorce from Morgan Evans. Rather than hiding from the pain or pretending it didn't affect her, she wrote about it. She talked about it in interviews. She led her fans into a process of healing and rediscovering herself. The album's Subject to Change was critically acclaimed precisely because of its emotional honesty and vulnerability. She didn't try to present a false image of having it all together. She let people see her as a work in progress, as someone figuring it out in real time. That authenticity is part of what made her so beloved by fans and respected by peers. In her TikTok video following the Chase Stokes breakup, where she asked people to let us be, she said something really important, that they were going through what they needed to go through and would share more when they were ready. This shows an understanding that healing isn't a performance for public consumption, that sometimes you need privacy and space to process difficult emotions before you can articulate them in a way that makes sense to others. It's likely that we'll eventually hear Kelsea's perspective on this period of her life through her music, but that it will come when she's ready, when she's processed enough to transform raw pain into art. One of the most interesting aspects of this entire situation is how it highlights the different standards and expectations placed on men versus women, particularly around heartbreak and moving on. When Keith Urban's separation became public, the immediate narrative wasn't about Nicole potentially dating again. It was about who Keith might be interested in. The assumption seems to be that as a man, particularly as a successful man in his field, he would be the pursuer, the one making choices about new relationships. Women he interacts with are framed as potential romantic interests, as if their primary relevance is their availability and appeal to him. Meanwhile, when discussing Kelsea, there's often an emphasis on her serial monogamy, the fact that she's had multiple significant relationships that have ended. There's sometimes an implication, subtle or not so subtle, that there must be something wrong, some pattern she needs to break. The fact that she's been open about her heartbreaks and healing process is admirable, but it's also used against her in certain narratives, as if her vulnerability is evidence of instability rather than strength. The double standard is glaring when you really examine it. Both Keith and Kelsea are adults who have every right to form whatever relationships they choose, romantic or otherwise, without having to justify those choices to public. The fact that they're public figures doesn't actually obligate them to explain their personal lives, though the nature of country music and its emphasis on authenticity means they'll likely choose to share some aspect of their experiences eventually, on their own terms and in their own time. Let's also consider the age difference between Keith and Kelsea, which is 25 years. Keith is 57, Kelsea is 32. If they were to pursue a romantic relationship, this would likely become a topic of discussion and potentially criticism. In our current cultural moment, there's increased scrutiny of age gap relationships, particularly those between older men and younger women, with questions about power dynamics, life stages, and whether such relationships can truly be partnerships of equals. Keith's professional stature and legacy in country music far exceeds Kelsea's at this point in her career, though she's certainly a star in her own right. That power differential could complicate a romantic relationship in ways that don't affect their friendship. However, it's also worth noting that both are adults well into adulthood, not a situation where a much older person is pursuing someone barely out of adolescence. Kelsea is an established artist with her own career, her own financial independence, her own life experience, including a previous marriage and subsequent relationships. She's not a young ingenue who might be unduly influenced by an older man's attention if they would develop a romantic connection. While the age gap might raise eyebrows, it wouldn't necessarily be inappropriate or problematic in a way that some age gap relationships can be. But again, all available evidence suggests that what's actually happening is much simpler and in some ways more beautiful. Two friends supporting each other through difficult times. The fact that our culture struggles to accept this, that we immediately look for romantic subtext in close friendships between men and women, says more about our collective assumptions and limitations than it does about Keith and Kelsea's actual relationship. Let's imagine for a moment how valuable their friendship must be right now. Keith can talk to Kelsea about what it's like to have your relationship dissected by strangers, to have every public appearance analyzed for signs of happiness or strain, to wonder if people are listening to your music for the art or for the gossip. He can ask her advice about how to handle social media, about how to set boundaries with fans who feel entitled to information about your personal life, about how to protect your children from excessive public attention. He can be vulnerable about his pain, his regrets, his fears about the future, without worrying that she'll judge him or lose respect for him. Kelsea can talk to Keith about the particular challenges of breakups in your 30s, about wondering if you're running out of time to find the right person and build a family, if that's what you want, about the exhaustion of starting over again, about the difficulty of trusting your judgment in relationships when past relationships haven't worked out. She can seek his perspective as someone who is older, who has been through more life experience, who might have wisdom to offer about resilience and healing. She can also simply enjoy the company of someone who makes her laugh, who understands the pressures she's under, who sees her as a whole person rather than just as a potential romantic partner. Their friendship, viewed this way, isn't a consolation prize or a stepping stone to something else. It's valuable in and of itself. Perhaps even more valuable than a romantic relationship would be right now, because it offers support without the complications and expectations that come with romance. They can simply be there for each other, show up as friends, provide comfort and perspective, without any agenda beyond genuine care for each other's well-being. As we look toward the future, there are several possible trajectories for Keith and Kelsea's relationship. They might continue as close friends, supporting each other through this challenging period and remaining in each other's lives as trusted confidants and occasional collaborators. This is perhaps the most likely outcome, and wouldn't be any less meaningful than the alternatives. True friendship, particularly friendship that endures through difficult times, is rare and precious, and should be celebrated rather than viewed as a disappointing alternative to romance. They might, after sufficient time has passed and healing has occurred, develop romantic feelings for each other and choose to explore that possibility. This would be a natural evolution of their existing closeness and wouldn't necessarily diminish the authenticity of their current support for each other. Sometimes the person you need as a friend during a crisis becomes the person you want as a partner once you're ready for that kind of connection again. Country music would, of course, go absolutely wild if this happened, and the narrative appeal would be enormous. Childhood hero and fan, mentor and mentee, friends who became lovers. But it's important to emphasize that this is pure speculation, and there's currently no evidence that either Keith or Kelsea is interested in taking their relationship in this direction. They might also drift apart naturally as they heal and move forward with their separate lives. Friendships formed or deepened during crisis don't always survive once the crisis passes. As Keith and Kelsea rebuild their individual lives, establish new routines, potentially pursue new relationships with other people, they might find that they have less in common or less need for the intense support they're currently providing each other. This wouldn't mean their friendship was fake or that their connection wasn't real. It would simply reflect the reality that people and relationships evolve, and not every connection is meant to be permanent. What's most important, regardless of which trajectory their relationship follows, is that both Keith and Kelsea emerge from this period of heartbreak as healthier, more self-aware individuals who have processed their pain rather than simply masking it or running from it. The willingness to be vulnerable, to seek support, to acknowledge that you're struggling rather than pretending everything is fine, that's actually incredibly healthy and admirable. The fact that they have each other during this time, that they don't have to face these challenges completely alone, is genuinely good news regardless of whether their relationship remains platonic or ever becomes romantic. Let's also acknowledge the role that fans play in all of this. Country music fans are passionate, loyal, and deeply invested in their favorite artists' lives and well-being. Many fans have expressed genuine happiness that Keith has supportive friends around him during this difficult time. They've shared their own stories of friendship helping them through heartbreak, of finding comfort in unexpected connections, of the power of having someone who truly understands what you're going through. These fans aren't looking for gossip or drama. They're genuinely hoping that Keith finds peace and healing however that looks for him. Other fans, however, have engaged in more speculative discussions, creating timelines of Keith and Kelsea's interactions, analyzing photos for evidence of romantic chemistry, predicting when they might officially announce a relationship. Some have taken sides, declaring whether they'd approve or disapprove a romantic relationship between the two. Some have compared Kelsea to Nicole, discussing which woman is better suited for Keith, as if he's a prize to be won and women are interchangeable accessories to his life rather than individuals with their own value and agency. This kind of fan behavior, while understandable given the parasocial nature of celebrity fandom, can be harmful. It puts pressure on Keith and Kelsea to either confirm or deny romantic involvement, when they might simply want privacy, to figure things out without public commentary. It reduces complex human beings and relationships to simplified narratives that fit pre-existing storylines. It treats real people's pain and healing process as entertainment rather than as a serious, difficult experience it actually is. The healthiest response fans can have is probably something like what Kelsea requested. Let them be. Support their music. Show up to their concerts. Stream their songs. Appreciate their artistry. If and when they choose to share details about their personal lives, receive that information with respect and kindness. But don't demand access to every aspect of their lives. Don't feel entitled to explanations for their choices. And don't treat their relationships as content that exists primarily for your consumption and entertainment. As we near the end of this deep dive into Keith Urban and Kelsea Ballerini's mysterious bond, let's return to where we started. The question of what's really going on between them. Based on all available evidence, conversations with sources close to both artists, and analysis of their history and current circumstances, the most honest answer is this. They're friends who are supporting each other through difficult times. And beyond that, we don't know and perhaps don't need to know. Their relationship, whatever its exact nature, is serving a valuable purpose for both of them right now, providing comfort, understanding, and connection during a period of profound change and loss. Whether that friendship ever evolves into romance, whether they're currently exploring that possibility, whether there are romantic feelings that neither has acknowledged publicly, these are questions that only Keith and Kelsea can answer, and they're under no obligation to share those answers with any of us. The speculation is natural, human, and in some ways inevitable given their circumstances and the culture of celebrity and country music. But the speculation is also, ultimately, beside the point. What matters is that two talented artists who have given so much to their fans through their music are taking care of themselves and each other during a challenging period. What matters is that they're modeling healthy friendship and support rather than immediately jumping into rebound relationships or trying to numb their pain through unhealthy coping mechanisms. What matters is that they'll both emerge from this experience with material for future songs, deeper self-awareness, and hopefully a sense of resilience and hope about what comes next. The stunned fans mentioned in our title are reacting to the surprise of seeing two people they've admired individually suddenly connected in an unexpected way. But perhaps the real story isn't about surprise or speculation or potential romance at all. Perhaps the real story is about the power of friendship, the importance of having people who understand you in your darkest moments, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of heartbreak. Keith, Urban, and Kelsea Ballerini are both going to be okay, maybe even better than okay, because they have talent, resources, support systems, and each other to lean on when things get hard. And really, when you strip away all the speculation and gossip, that's a beautiful story all on its own. Sometimes the most mysterious bond isn't romantic. It's simply two people showing up for each other exactly when they're needed most, and that might be the most important love story of all. The love of true friendship that endures through life's most challenging chapters.